So you have AB designs, which are the simplest. You have the ABAB designs, which give you that extra boost of knowing the intervention works even if you take two different baseline measurements. And then you have the multiple baseline design. And what you have here is observations on more than one subject. Now be clear that there still is a big difference between this design and a group experimental design, because you are not taking the averages of these people. You're not looking at them combined. You're looking at each subject individually, not as a group. And you're trying to see if the intervention is if you see a difference, if you see changes in each single person or subject. So the idea here is that a few things is, one, you usually want to have about 3 clients, and this might also be where you look at maybe multiple problems. So maybe you are taking measures on a few different things. So let's say you want to use cognitive behavioral therapy to make a difference on both anxiety and depression. So you may want to have one chart that looks at indicators for anxiety and another chart that looks at indicators for depression. So you may have that, or again, you may have different people. So a couple of things to look out for is maybe you may see changes, you may see how treatment starts to impact each other. So you expect a cognitive behavioral therapy to treat anxiety and depression, but what if you're treating anxiety and it doesn't make a difference on anxiety, but it does make a difference on depression? So you want to kind of think through the idea of the fit between the intervention and maybe some potential differences it might have unknowingly or unintentionally on different indicators. The other thing to think about is that maybe if you have clients that know each other, so maybe you're looking at 3 clients that are in a therapeutic group, maybe their behavior might impact each other, and that impacts the intervention, or that impacts the results more than the intervention itself. So be careful that you don't see more of a spreading out of intervention effects, and that the change you see is really due to the intervention and not due to this kind of generalization. Now, the fourth type of design you want to look at is called multiple component. And so here you're looking at multiple types of interventions. And so in this example, let's say you are looking at the number of days worked and interventions that can help people get back on their feet. So you have your baseline, but then maybe you want to test, does social skills training make a difference? Well, what about rewarding people for work? And what about case advocacy? In this chart, you see that intervention B and intervention C don't seem to make much of a difference, but intervention D clearly showed some, at least a visual, significant difference from a baseline and from the prior 2 interventions. So you might use this to change up treatment intensity. So maybe this is once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week until you see a difference, right? You might change the type of treatment like we saw. Maybe you combine. Maybe this is social skills. Maybe this is reward. Maybe this is social skills and reward. So you can use this to play around with seeing whether one thing makes a difference, or whether combining things. You could also separate them. So you might see, let's combine social skills and reward, and then let's drop it to just social or drop it to just reward. And then finally, you could just randomize it. Does it make a difference if you do social skills first and then reward, or reward and then social skills? So again, a lot of this is just based on your knowledge as a practitioner, what intervention you're doing, and to answer those questions you might have of, are certain treatments more effective together? Are certain treatments more effective if they're done in a certain order, or if they're done combined in certain ways? Now, when you're interpreting these charts, you're looking at them. And as you look at them, then you want to have these questions in mind. You want to see a visual pattern, of course. But when we remember, we talk about coincidences. We don't talk about proof. We talk about those coincidences in single subject design. Basically, we're saying, do you see changes in frequency, in levels, and trends? Do you see it after the intervention? In other words, are you seeing changes happen, these coincidences, after baseline or after the intervention is introduced? You also, at some point, will integrate statistical analysis into this, not in this course, but you also want to look at statistical probability. In other words, what if this is just coincidence? What if there actually is a range where people just randomly work, their number of days worked goes up and down depending on how they feel? What if this is just somebody that feels particularly motivated and here they've been sick? Again, you want to eliminate any change that's just due to random chance. Statistics does that for you. And then you're also going to want to interpret whether it's important from a clinical perspective, whether it's meaningful. So you might see a huge difference on a graph, but realistically, is this really meaningful from a clinical perspective? What does this mean? This might be a statistically significant difference, but if you know that this isn't enough to really make a significant change in somebody being able to get employment, then that might still not matter from your clinical perspective. So make sure you can interpret the results and figure out the meaning behind them. So the last few slides here is just a review for you, so you can take the last few slides and go through and just test, see if you understand the concepts. You can look at the types of designs, the frequency of the observations, what the dependent and independent variables are. You can try to figure out what the baseline pattern is, see what kind of changes you observe. So in other words, just look through these and make sure you understand what's happening. I'll let you do that on your own time with the presentation. So that is it for this presentation.